Hey everyone, Jeremy here. My dad and I recently went on a kayak trip, and I just wanted to share this painting that I made as a result of it. It was on the Elkhorn Creek in central Kentucky. It's a really, really beautiful area. As you can see here, there's like a lot of wildlife around, mostly turtles, a couple of Canadian geese. This one was actually pretty friendly. I thought for sure it was gonna run out and attack my dad, but no, it just sat there and chilled and just let us film it. It was pretty cool. Yeah, super chill geese there. Um, but yeah, I mean, as you can see, it's got the same problems as a lot of creeks around the world, like some trash and debris and things like that. But actually, it is kind of gross. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of gross. But you spend most of the time in the kayak, so it doesn't really. I don't think you're gonna get typhoid from the water or anything like that. But we live in Kentucky. This is what Kentucky people do for fun, and it's what we do. We were lucky enough to actually see a train pass overhead, like while we were there, which is a lot of fun. Like to be underneath the train as it's passing by. Um, we sat there and actually watched it for quite a bit because uh, I don't know if you can see it in this video, but there's like a lot of graffiti on trains, and to me, being into art, that's like a free art show there. It's kind of fun. Um, and this stuff comes from like all around the country too. So I know that you're not really supposed to tag trains, but if a train happens to be going by, that's a free art show. So anyway, I'm jumping into doing the actual painting. So let me talk about that for a bit. What you see here is me wetting the paper first, so that you can get this kind of blended look with the watercolor. This painting is done in watercolor and gouache. Watercolor kind of is like a base coat, and then I came in with gouache over some of the darker areas. So I started off with like kind of a gray sky because the picture on the left is a photo I took while we were actually out on our trip. And I wanted to kind of match the photo as closely as possible, which does kind of have a grayish blue sky. So I tried to do that in the picture, but I wasn't really liking it. So here in a moment, I'm going to come back with some blue, which I think ends up looking a lot better. This is me putting in some of the dark areas. Now, I wouldn't typically do this in watercolor because like watercolor is transparent. So if you try to come back over these really dark areas with watercolor, probably not going to work so well. But since I intended to do some gouache over the watercolor, I wasn't too concerned. Um, Here I'm making marks downward because I think that that looks really good for reflected water. I kind of learned that trick from Bob Ross. He does that all the time. Here I'm adding in some of the shadow for the bushes and trees and so forth. I'm not really happy with my choice of colors here at the moment. I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more green, but it works out in the end. I end up covering up most of this background underpainting. It's mostly just there to kind of let me know where things are and where I intend for things to be while I'm actually painting. Because at some point here, I lose my sketch that I had done prior to doing the painting. Oh, this is really annoying. So I did this morning, and the light coming in through the window just kind of like really makes a mess out of my video. I apologize for that. Um, Apparently, my window looks directly east with the rising sun. Typically, I do my videos a little bit later in the day. At one point, it became very difficult to even see the colors, so I actually had to let this dry and kind of wait until later in the day to finish it up. But yeah, so here I'm adding the blue that I was talking about. I think it looks a lot better with the green. I'm pretty happy with it. In terms of the actual composition, this is a photo I took while I was out there, but I really like the composition here. You've got this natural archway of branches over the. It kind of looks like a lake, but it's not. It is a creek going through central Kentucky out here. So this is me kind of figuring out where tree branches might be. I I have to admit, tree branches are not my strong point. I think I'm going to have to work on that in the future. Especially like a little bit later on, I get like a finer brush and I try to do like line work. In the past, when working with a watercolor, I usually leave like line work for like, I don't know, ink pens and stuff. Here I'm trying to do it with a brush. I think I just need a finer brush. Because I couldn't get the very fine one, fine twigs and branches that I want. It looks okay, but I feel like it could be better. Over on the left side, I kind of wish I had waited for it to dry before I even attempted to do that tree, just because as you can see, it kind of like blotted out a little bit, and I think the finished painting kind of suffers a little bit because of that, but it is what it is. I mean, this is just for fun. I'm trying to like, remember the fun time that me and my dad had out on the creek, just chilling, looking at geese, watching trains go by. It was a very, very nice day. And whenever I look at this painting now, I just kind of feel the same relaxed hanging out that I did while we were out there. So in my mind, that makes the painting successful, whether it actually looks right or not. So anyway, I'm continuing adding some of the shadows here. As you can see, the light got a little bit better, so I can actually work with color. I'm not very happy at this point with the green I chose. I think it's a little bit too bright. There are some areas in the picture that have kind of like a brighter green, and it doesn't really hurt anything for those to be poking through. I'm a fan of like applying a bunch of different colors so that you have something visually interesting to look at, whether it actually exists in reality or not. So these little bits of almost this like bluish green peeking through the trees, it's not a big deal. It's fine. And then as you can see, I tried to add a little bit more shadow to the bushes. And then here I've done a little bit of color correcting. So at this point, I'm like, well, let me mix in some yellow ochre with that to kind of make it a little more natural. And I think this works a lot better. So as you can see, I've kind of moved to a flat brush here with some bristles on it to kind of do those leaves. It's almost like a stipple art effect. I think it's a really good way of making leaves on trees and stuff. You just kind of vary how hard you're pressing it, and then you just kind of put them in randomly. Now, of course, I'm trying to match the photo as closely as possible without like, photocopying it essentially. So I am trying to create that natural arch that I really liked in the photo as I'm doing these leaves. But I'm not too worried about matching it perfectly. Leaves grow the way they grow. A big gust of wind comes by, all those leaves are going to move anyway. So yeah. So, but I think this looks pretty good. And like I said, that bluish green that I initially started with doesn't look so bad. It's kind of like a background to this the much warmer green that I'm using here now. But yeah, just adding a little happy leaves, as Bob Ross would call it. And yeah, so as it gets to the top, it becomes a little more sparse and a little bit smaller leaves and stuff. So that's just lightly tapping it instead of like, pressing down as hard as I had been in the lower parts. Also, I should note that I'm using a lot less water here. So gouache is, I am using gouache because I'm going over some of those dark areas. So gouache, works like watercolor. You can add as much or as little water as you want. For those finer leaves at the top, I added much less water. Now down here in the actual creek part, a lot of water, because I want it to look fluid. Also, if you note, when I first started doing the bottom, I was doing brush strokes down to create that reflection. Now I'm going across to kind of like mimic the ripple effect if I can. And I think that works really well. So like, you go down to get the reflections and then you go across to create the ripples. And then, varying strokes of color in there to really commit on those ripples. I was a little worried about these darker ripples here and stuff, but I think it worked fine. It dries a lot lighter, and after I distributed that darkness, it didn't look so intimidating. But I was a little bit nervous there, to be honest. Yeah, so so far, I think it's looking really good. I like the colors. The blue and the greens work really well together. Once I start putting in these darker greens down in the water, it really captured that reflection that you see when you're out there kayaking here in Kentucky. And it's just, I don't know, like outsiders might look at it as like, oh, that water's gross. It's kind of swampy and everything. And, they're probably right. But you're in the boat. You're not in the water. Like I've seen people go swimming in those creeks and stuff. And I would never do that myself. But, for the most part, all you've got to worry about is a random snake or there's some snapping turtles in there. Those are the things you have to worry about. So here I'm reinforcing the leaves on the bushes and trees. Trying to get in some of those shadows before I come in and add some highlights. It really creates that depth that you're looking for in foliage, if I'm pronouncing that right. It really creates this really neat effect where you're with less information, you're not drawing each individual leaf. You are creating like the appearance of a fully like a full bush of tree leaves. So now I'm adding some highlights, some of the lighter leaves that reflect off the sun or just grow naturally lighter. Um, yeah, I really like this so far. Those basic three layers where you have the shadows, you have like these midtones of color, and then these highlights of color. And then you kind of vary it up a little bit. Some areas are darker than others in the midtones, and it really kind of hammers home that this is nature. You're out in nature here. So here I'm trying to create this line of leaves, and I realized I made that a little bit too thick, so I fixed that. But when we went out there, it had recently rained, which caused like a bunch of leaves to form along the edges and stuff. And I'm trying to create that here in the picture. And I think it works pretty well. They're just like little spots of light on the water. Again, little details like that matter. Oh, here I made a mistake. I was trying to create that highlight in the very back on the horizon, and I made that line way too thick. So, but it's good because when I did that, I realized, well, I don't have enough shadow in here along the tree or the creek bank. So I'm adding more shadow to kind of like do that little bit of separation between the bushes and the water. And you can see it in the actual reference photo. So I'm kind of copying that over. And I realized I hadn't done that yet. So I'm glad I made that mistake on the highlight there. But I do eventually put that little bit of highlight in. And I think it's really good because it lets you know that, the creek continues past the bushes. It doesn't just stop there. This is me trying to fix up my tree branches a little bit, create a little bit of texture to them. I'm mostly happy with how those trees turned out. I think they're fine. They're a little bit off in the distance, so they don't need a lot of detail, but I do have that marked down as something I need to improve upon. I need to improve upon doing these random twigs on these things. Here it's actually working a little bit better because I did learn that, well, maybe I shouldn't press so hard. But yeah, little twigs in the bushes and stuff, just to let you know that there is a lot going on in those bushes. You don't have to draw every single branch. You just throw in a few, kind of gives the appearance that nature is going on here. So as it starts coming together, I mean, this really looks like a nice creek, but it's missing one thing, and I wonder if you guys can guess what it is. Well, the highlight for one, but yeah, it's missing my dad. My dad's out there kayaking off in the distance. Um, as soon as I get done adding a few highlights to the ripples that are going on in there, I really like that effect. By the way, I think that gives it this nice painterly look to the reflection on the water. Because like the sun is again back to the composition, you got this natural archway, but then the sun is actually showing through it and highlighting the water. I really like that. So here's my dad, which is, essential for capturing this moment because my hope is that I'll frame this, put it up on the wall, and then, look at it for years to come and think about that day that I had out with my dad where we were just kayaking, drinking beer, and watching trains and geese. Um, So I was a little nervous doing this because it is kind of a small element. I wasn't sure I could get, something that looks like a kayak in there. And then, my dad's super small in it because he is off in the distance. Uh, so I'm very happy with how he turned out. I think that's a realistic looking kayak. I just put in some shadows for his face because you can't really see anyway in the picture. He's wearing a hat which casts shadows on his face, so you can't really see that it's him. You just have to know that he was there. It could be anybody, but I love his little hat. He wears a straw hat because he doesn't want to get the sun on him. And yeah, I honestly I think this picture turned out really well. I mean, there may be some technical issues with it. An artist better than me could have probably created a much better picture. But to me, the personal moment of being out there kayaking with my dad, I feel like this captured it. So I'm very happy with it. So anyway, I appreciate you guys sharing this moment with me. And, if you like what you saw, feel free to like and subscribe so that I can bring you more. And I appreciate you guys watching. So until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye.